good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM Today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Thursday, 10th April, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. The United States, under President Trump, has initiated a series of tariffs, igniting global trade tensions. Trump suspended import taxes for 90 days for numerous countries. Simultaneously, the U.S. escalated the trade war with China through additional tariffs, prompting retaliatory measures from Beijing. These heavy U.S. tariffs on other Asian countries have inadvertently made China a more appealing option for companies seeking stability amid global trade uncertainty. China is now actively seeking to forge a united front with other nations. The goal is to pressure Washington to roll back the imposed tariffs. Simultaneously, China and the European Union are exploring new trade partnerships in response to the steep U.S. tariffs. However, the crowded global market presents a risk of Europe becoming a destination for cheap goods. Saudi Arabia saw Tesla launch its electric vehicles amidst a challenging economic backdrop. The electric vehicles accounted for only 1% of car sales in 2024, based on TWC data. Tesla will face competition from Chinese EV makers. Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs forecasts Saudi Arabia's budget deficit may double to $75 billion. This is due to falling oil prices, potentially disrupting the kingdom's expenditure plans. Saudi Arabia needs oil prices above $90 per barrel to break even. Great. Here are news articles. Good luck. 1. Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new sanctions against Russia, targeting individuals and entities involved in disinformation and cyber attacks. The measures are in response to Russia's ongoing aggression in Ukraine. Trudeau reiterated Canada's unwavering support for Ukrainian sovereignty. 2. Russia. The Kremlin dismissed Canada's sanctions as meaningless and vowed to retaliate. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that Russia would continue its military operations in Ukraine until its objectives are met. Russia accused Western countries of fueling the conflict by providing weapons to Ukraine. 3. Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy addressed the Canadian Parliament, pleading for more military and humanitarian aid. He specifically requested a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which NATO has repeatedly rejected. Zelenskyy thanked Canada for its support, but emphasized the urgent need for further assistance. 4. United States. President Joe Biden announced a new package of security assistance for Ukraine, including anti-aircraft systems and drones. Biden warned Russia against using chemical weapons in Ukraine, stating that the response would be severe. The U.S. also imposed additional sanctions on Russian oligarchs and their families. 5. Germany. Chancellor Olaf Scholz defended Germany's decision not to impose an immediate embargo on Russian energy imports. Scholz argued that such a move would have devastating consequences for the German economy. Germany is seeking alternative energy sources to reduce its dependence on Russia. 6. Canada. The Canadian government is facing increasing pressure to ban Russian oil and gas imports, despite relying on Russia for a relatively small percentage of its energy needs. Opposition parties have criticized Trudeau's government for not taking a stronger stance against Russia's energy sector. Public demonstrations have been held across Canada, demanding an end to all trade with Russia. 7. Russia. The Russian government has banned exports of over 200 goods to countries that have imposed sanctions against it. The ban includes technological, telecommunications, and medical equipment, as well as agricultural products. The move is seen as retaliation for Western sanctions and is expected to further strain global supply chain. 8. United States. The U.S. Department of Justice announced the creation of a task force to investigate and prosecute individuals and entities involved in evading sanctions against Russia. The task force will focus on targeting assets of Russian oligarchs and disrupting illicit financial networks. The U.S. is working with international partners to coordinate sanctions enforcement. 9. United Kingdom. The UK government has announced new sanctions targeting Russian banks and wealthy individuals with close ties to the Kremlin. The measures include asset freezes and travel bans. The UK is also providing military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. 10. European Union. The European Union agreed to a fourth package of sanctions against Russia, targeting key sectors of the Russian economy. The sanctions include restrictions on trade, finance, and technology. The EU is also considering further measures to reduce its dependence on Russian energy. 11. Ukraine. Ukrainian forces continue to resist Russian advances in several key cities, including Kyiv and Kharkiv. Civilian casualties are mounting, and millions of Ukrainians have been displaced. The United Nations has warned of a growing humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. 12. International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court has opened an investigation into alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in Ukraine. The investigation will focus on alleged atrocities committed by all parties to the conflict. The ICC's chief prosecutor has called for cooperation from all states. 13. Canada. Canada is expediting the processing of immigration applications from Ukrainian refugees. The government has announced a new program to provide temporary residency permits to Ukrainians fleeing the conflict. Canada has a large Ukrainian diaspora and has historically been a welcoming destination for Ukrainian immigrants. 14. Poland. Poland has taken in the majority of Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war. The Polish government is providing shelter, food, and medical assistance to the refugees. Poland is also advocating for stronger sanctions against Russia and increased military support for Ukraine. 15. Hungary. Hungary has accepted Ukrainian refugees, but has refused to allow the transit of weapons through its territory to Ukraine. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has maintained close ties with Russia and has been criticized for his reluctance to condemn Russian aggression. Hungary is heavily reliant on Russian energy imports. 16. NATO. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg writed that NATO will not establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine, as it could lead to a direct conflict with Russia. Stoltenberg emphasized that NATO is providing defensive weapons to Ukraine and has increased its military presence in Eastern Europe to deter further Russian aggression. 17. United Nations. The United Nations General Assembly overwhelmingly approved a resolution condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine and demanding an immediate cessation of hostilities. The resolution was supported by 141 countries. Russia, Belarus, North Korea, Eritrea, and Syria voted against the resolution. 18. China. China has abstained from voting on the UN resolution condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. China has called for a peaceful resolution to the conflict through dialogue and negotiation. China has also criticized Western sanctions against Russia, arguing that they are not a solution to the crisis. 19. India. India has also abstained from voting on the UN resolution condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. India has historical ties with Russia and relies on Russia for a significant portion of its military equipment. India has expressed concern about the humanitarian situation in Ukraine and has called for an immediate ceasefire. 20. Australia. Australia has imposed sanctions on hundreds of Russian individuals and entities, including President Vladimir Putin. Australia is also providing military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Australia has condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. India's stock market is poised for a robust opening on April 11, driven by optimism over the United States' 90-day tariff moratorium. This pause has sparked interest in how India will fare in securing advantageous trade conditions with the U.S., particularly as countries vie to finalize trade deals with America. Argentina is currently experiencing market volatility, a challenge for President Milei. Canada is considering how to allocate revenue from retaliatory tariffs to support affected workers and businesses, a complex decision given potential economic disruptions. The European Union initially postponed retaliatory measures when President Trump paused tariffs, hoping for negotiations even as tariffs on metals appeared to remain. IFBH Limited is shifting its listing from Singapore to Hong Kong, drawn by the HKX's strong connection to mainland China. Its primary market, the Hang Seng Index, rose, tracking other Asian markets, with most stocks gaining following the tariff pause. Israeli forces are currently advancing into Gaza, seemingly preparing for a full occupation. Italy's Classidra is evaluating the sale of its software company, Imprisoft, while Italian authorities are pursuing Ion's Pignataro for €1.20 billion in a tax investigation. Japan's Nikkei index jumped over 9% after President Trump's tariff pause. Bond markets from Australia to Japan saw volatility due to the U.S. Treasury market as investors lowered expectations for interest rate cuts after the tariff announcement. Mexico is hoping for tariff exemptions to benefit its automotive industry amidst the global trade war, despite concerns stemming from President Trump's delayed tariffs. Norway intends to reduce its investment in small emerging market stocks held by its sovereign wealth fund. Serbia has chosen to keep interest rates steady due to persistent high inflation, despite indicators of a weakening economy. South Korean opposition leader Lee Jae-myung is running for president, following President Yoon Suk-yeol's removal from office after imposing martial law. Taiwan's stock market experienced a record surge following the U.S. tariff reprieve. In the United States, the S&P 500 rose by 9.52% overnight after President Trump's tariff pause, its largest single-day gain since 2008. The U.S. cruise industry remains relatively stable, as bookings are made in advance, buffering it from short-term policy changes. Walmart executives have told analysts that tariffs are creating uncertainty in their outlook, while maintaining confidence in their overall strategy. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.